Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Making Multifamily Money podcast. So I'm actually very excited to have on my good friend, Nate. So as a quick background of Nate, he's actually a fellow pharmacist. So we're both legal drug dealers, right? Licensed drug dealers. He's also a realtor, a real estate investor, and a father of two daughters, I believe, or
Yep.
two schoolgirls. And on top of that, while working full-time as a pharmacist, he started his own website, realestaterph.com, where he's focused on real estate education designed to help pharmacists. As you know, we're all skeptical. But also, he actually hosts the Your Financial Pharmacist Real Estate Investing podcast, and I had the pleasure of being on that twice. So welcome to the show, Nate. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on. It's fun to get on this side of the mic. We got to interview you twice, so this is great to be on this side.
Yeah, every time I talked, I was like, I kind of want to know more about you guys. So let's just dive right in. So tell me, Nate, tell us about yourself and your journey in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. So the short version of a long story is that I have trouble sitting still. I have a passion for being uncomfortable, and so when I get comfortable in something, I want to shift to do something different. So I was licensed pharmacist in 2013. Loved pharmacy work. Um, my wife and I got pregnant with our first daughter in 2016. And at that time, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and realized that there was more out there than just working as an employee forever. So I wanted to find some ways to just diversify my own career, my own life, and found real estate and decided I'm going to jump in full, both feet and try to get licensed as a real estate agent and see if I like that. And knew that it would offer me an opportunity as a different career path too. So took that plunge, absolutely loved it, and have been working as a licensed real estate agent ever since. So we got into investing back in 2018, and that's taken off. And again, like you mentioned in your intro, we run the website. We do referrals all over the country. We kind of have our hand in a whole bunch of different things, and it keeps life interesting, keeps it fun.
Yeah, wow, I didn't realize you graduated 2013. That's when I graduated
Yeah,
as well. And it seems like you had the 5-year itch, is what I call it, right?
yeah,
You
100%.
graduate, you're focused on your career. Then after 5 years, you're like, this is pretty repetitive, and you quickly realize there's a ceiling, right?
Yeah.
There's a ceiling that you hit. So I kind of want to dive in a bit deeper. So, when you graduated pharmacy school, did you have any student debt?
Yeah, so between my wife and I, also a pharmacist, we had $318,000 between
Jeez.
the two of us that we had to tackle.
Okay, wow. And then when you kind of graduated, did you kind of have a plan of attack for that student debt?
Not in the least. We both did residencies out of school, and I remember vividly going to residency and knowing that those were being like turned on. And I was like, I don't understand what these loans are, how much I owe, how do I pay as little as possible because I make, $34,000 a year or whatever as a resident. And like, that's all we had. Like, so what we were going to do. So, yeah, I did not have a good plan of attack. It wasn't until, gosh, probably a couple of years later that we really started to attack those in a meaningful way. We just kind of ignored them, which was again a terrible plan, but we didn't know any better at the time.
No, I'm glad you shared that because, a lot of people don't know pharmacists, we have doctorate level degrees,
Yeah.
right? But we're doctorates in pharmacy and they teach us absolutely nothing about personal finance. I've maybe had one like lecture during
Right.
graduation week about personal finance at best,
Yeah.
right? And at that time, you're just trying to graduate. And then for you, you're focusing in on residency. So,
Yeah.
I know you felt a little ashamed sharing that, but that's most pharmacists. I'll be
Yeah.
honest. Most pharmacists, we come out, even to this day, 10 years later, they don't, what's a 401k?
Yeah.
Student loans, I just auto pay minimum payments.
Yep.
And so it's very common with that. But, like a lot of investors, you kind of mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So that's kind of the book that turns the mindset. So I guess what got you to read that novel and what mindset shift did you have from
Yeah,
that?
it's funny. I've always loved reading, especially like, personal development and just, bestsellers, just things that the people have been recommending, right? And it's kind of been on that list of like, oh, you should read this book. And so everyone I talk to says, check this book out. And so finally it was like, okay, if we're going to have a child, if we're going to like plan for the future, there's going to be a huge change in expenses coming down the road, right? We're barely getting by at this point uh, because of all the money I'm throwing at student loans, right? Because at this stage when I read that book, we were plowing away at the student loans, just trying to knock them out. I mean, throwing thousands of dollars at them every single month. And so then it became, well, what happens when we have daycare expenses and we have, like, what if I cut back on work, right? Or what if we have to cut back work? Like, what if, God forbid, one of our kids is sick? Like, what does that look like, right? So it just became this thing of like, well, I need to know more about personal finance if I'm going to actually have this child. And that seems like a weird catalyst, but that was the moment. And so it kind of forced me to look at, well, what books are out there that might help with this? That was one of them. Millionaire Next Door was another. There was a couple like that I was like, I need to read this because I think this is actually going to help with my parenting life. And so it was always on that list, and it became one of the good targets. And it, like you said, it just caused this switch to flick in terms of mindset changes.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that because, pharmacists, the one skill we do have is we're lifelong learners. That's kind of instilled within us, like from day one of pharmacy school. And, it seems like for you, you're like, oh, I have this kid now. Basically, a kid, it's an extra mortgage. Daycare is basically another mortgage, right?
At least
for like one kid. So on top of your student loans for both of you, you got your living expenses, whether you're renting or you own a house. And now you got a kid where if you both of you are working full time, you're going to pay for daycare. And when kids go to daycare, they get sick. And, we're pharmacists, we're paranoid as heck and skeptical of everything. And so it made sense that out of necessity, you were kind of pushed to basically learn and straighten your finances with that. So, and, for me, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad too. That was kind of one of my first books. But like, what was kind of that key message that you learned from Rich Dad Poor Dad that really shifted that mindset for you?
It's funny. I don't know if I realized it at the time, but I think the biggest thing, there's a line he puts in that book. It's not, I can't do this thing. It's how do I do this thing? And we have taken that as like almost like our family mantra at this point, where we'll even, so the kids are older now. I've got a 7 and a 5-year-old. So one of the things we do every year, and we have for a couple of years now, is we sit down at the beginning of the year and we do this big goals list, and everybody gets to put their own goals on the list. We do a big hike and talk about the goals we want to have for the year. And what's cool is that the kids are starting to figure out that they can put anything they want on the list, but it's not, you can put anything you want on there, but you have to figure out how we can achieve that, right? So if it's like something like go to Disney World, right? So that was my youngest daughter's goal this year, and we went, was go to Disney World. Well, one of the things that comes with Disney World is that it's expensive, right? So part of that, and that's difficult for kids to understand, but what she can understand is that, okay, if we want to go to Disney, we need to budget for that, right? It's not that we can't go, it's that we can, but we can't spend money on plastic garbage at Target every week. And, all these other things you might want to do have to take a back seat if the goal is to go to Disney, right? So it's not that, it's not how, it's how do we build that plan? So a lot of what we took away from that book at the time, and again, I've carried forward as, a whole family, is how can we do the things that we want to do? Not, oh, we can't do that, it's too hard, or we don't have money for that, we can't do that. And so we're really, really intentional about how do we make these things happen rather than, we can't do that or it's impossible.
No, I actually love that quote too, because that quote resonated with me as well. Like, it's not I can't do it, it's how can I do this? And your how can may vary based on your situation, right? And what I really loved is that you're involving your kids in this, right? Like me and you wish we had this type of conversation at that age. Like for us, you have to get pretty good grades, good in college, get good grades in college, go to farm school, try to survive, come out with this massive debt, and you're just on this hamster wheel. You never questioned a single thing. Like, at least I didn't.
Same.
But it's amazing that like your daughter's learned this at like 5 or 6, and then you are like have a doctorate level degree. She thinks you're a god, right? Because they're your kids, and like you're literally just teaching her something that like you just learned like not too long ago,
right?
So I'm reading a book, so no, really love that you're doing that, and then also involving your kids, because now they hear this at 6, they're already ingrained in this, like, oh, I can't do this. It's like, how can I do this?
That's the hope,
so
right?
That's so like hope. for me too, like I was just like, well, if you just say I can't do it and you write it off, like 100% guaranteed you can't do it.
Yeah.
But if you think how can I, there's at least a 1% or even 0.5% chance of achieving it. or
And
at least striving towards it?
it allows us this goals list, but other things as well. It allows you to just change your mindset toward and your priorities and realize what is actually important to you. So like one of the big goals we had a couple of years, the first year we did it was I wanted to step back and not work at 40 hours a week. I wanted to hang out with the kids. I wanted to get them off the bus. I wanted to get them on the bus. And so one of my goals was to step back from work in a 40-hour way. Like I don't want to work 40 hours. And we did it. Again, it was like, okay, that becomes the most important thing. Well, then here's what needs to shift to allow that to take place. And so now again, we're blessed. My wife and I both work part-time at this point, and it's awesome. Like you can't beat it. And it's just because that's important to us right now, we're going to make that a top priority. And it's a matter of how can we make that happen? Not, oh, we can't do that because blah, blah, blah is expensive. It's no, how can we do that? What can we shift in our budget to make this happen? And we did. It's been awesome. So
Yeah, so the key message I got out of that was you're living very intentionally, right? Like you purposely know, okay, I want to be part-time. And what's nice about pharmacy, it's easy to be part-time, right?
Yeah.
You can work 1 to 2 days a week. And that's really accessible in healthcare in general for those who don't know.
Lucky.
But basically, because you had that goal, there's gonna have to be some sacrifices, right? Like, you're gonna have to save more money. Maybe you have to give up short-term gratification for a long-term goal. But every move you make, including your family, why you're doing it, because ultimately you want to be part-time and you're both part-time today, right? So it didn't come overnight. It became very intentional versus if, like, let's say you didn't question anything, went down the hamster wheel, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I just want to be part-time. Well, it's not going to happen right away, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So no, I really love that. So, okay, now let's just kind of dive into talk about a realtor. Becoming a realtor. So that's not something that I've done. So what kind of got you interested in becoming a realtor?
Yeah. So again, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and part of the other takeaway message that we didn't talk about was that I love this idea of being able to build a business or being able to build a diversification within myself, right? Not just one skill set. And so I think when I realized that I wanted to do real estate as part of one of those skill sets that I wanted to build out, I was in the middle of paying back student loan debt. I had no money to invest in real estate. Every penny I had was going toward student loan repayment or all the other random expenses we had to pay for regularly, right? So I was like, well, how can I get into real estate right now, even though I have no money, right? And the options would be, again, if you Google that, right, everybody's going to Google, when you read those books and you have no money, that's the first thing you do is like, how do I get into real estate with nothing? And there are answers like, right, get a good partner or start wholesaling. Well, I didn't have time for that kind of stuff. But what I did have the ability to do was go get licensed and see if I liked it. It was a really low barrier to entry. It was a great way for me to start learning real estate from the inside out. And it was going to get me close to all the things that I wanted to do, right? I could work with investors. I could start to learn contractors and contacts within the business. I could talk to lenders, talk to lawyers, all the people that I would eventually need for the real estate investing I wanted to do, even though I didn't have the capital to do that yet. So it seemed like a really easy next move for me, even though it's a licensed thing with a test and a bunch of classes and all this stuff. It was a relatively easy next move. And one that I could see having other payoffs as well, right? I could use that as a backup job if pharmacy didn't work out. Again, at the time, we weren't sure what we were going to do with the kids in terms of, was it daycare? Was one of us going to stay home? What does that look like? So it opened up a lot more options. And then once I started doing it, I realized that I really liked it. It was a great fit. I loved working with other healthcare professionals and buying and selling homes. It was just fun.
No, I love, you basically shared a concept called asymmetrical risk assessment, right? So basically your downside was $3,000 to $5,000 to become a realtor and some time. But I'll be honest, if you can finish pharmacy school, you can get any other licensure. It's easy at that point, right? Like we're smart enough to get that. And I researched it myself too. So your worst case is you wasted time and you wasted maybe $3,000 to $5,000. But your upside was, okay, if I can do this, then I can get another stream of income. I can learn more about real estate, make some connections here and there. And maybe, pharmacists, we're high income W-2 for the most part. You might have some friends, some classmates who want to buy houses and maybe they'll go to you and 3% commission on a high cost of living area. It's pretty decent, right? So, and that could supplement either your if you work part-time or also maybe cover for daycare if you want to work full-time. So you basically made that bet. And I thought it was a very good bet. It's a very low low downside of high upside. So
Yep, that's the
definitely
idea.
smart for that. But I guess when you got started as a realtor, like, I mean, I guess how much do you actually sell like right now? Like, what does your volume look like today? And like, I guess working backwards, how did it start off?
Yeah, so it started off terribly. I thought that every friend and family member that was like close to me, like you said, was going to come. Oh, Nate, I need you to help me buy this out. Nothing. I didn't do a single deal for 9 months, 8 months. So I mean, it was terrible. Like I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't have a niche. I had no experience. So anybody I went to who I even like remotely had a chance of helping them buy or sell a home, they were like, "How many transactions have you done?" And I'm like, done. So I didn't have the experience or the knowledge base of how to make this actually work. So it was about that 6 months mark or so of me doing literally nothing, while trying to put myself out there in ways that I thought were successful. That I said, okay, I need to adjust this. I need to change tactics. I need to come up with an actual plan, because if this is something I really want to pursue, like I need to do it for real, right? So
Yeah.
so I started talking with some people in my office, got a mentor within the brokerage, and really just started thinking about, okay, instead of trying to do what everybody else is doing, what is something that is unique for me? What is my unfair advantage, for example? And so for me, it was I am a healthcare professional. I'm a pharmacist. I know other pharmacists. I know the busy schedule of a pharmacist. I know the student loan debt problem of a pharmacist. Like I know all this stuff inside and out. And I also have a pretty good understanding of real estate investing. I've done a ton of reading, a ton of podcast listening, talking with lots of people. My father-in-law is a real estate developer. So like I had these pieces of an unfair advantage. And so at that 6 month mark, I really started to leverage that unfair advantage and tapped into the idea that like I'm going to be an agent for pharmacists. I am a pharmacist. I know what your life is like. I can help that out. And it just sort of clicked. It again, the website spawned from that. I started working with local pharmacists, helping them buy and sell homes. And it just kind of that niche sort of clicked. So today, in terms of like volume and transactions and stuff, I do anywhere from 8 to 20 deals, eight to 15 deals a year is about right. More or less than and one a month is pretty much standard for me. But that's the local deals, and then we do a lot of referrals all over the country. So we do dozens of those a year. We're referring people out to agents wherever they're looking to buy. We connect them with really good licensed agents wherever they're looking, again, buying or selling, investing, whatever. We do all that legwork for our clients so that they don't have to worry about it. So the local stuff, a good number, enough to keep me busy. And then the referral network is really where the meat comes from.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, like you said, the barrier to entry to become a realtor isn't high, right?
Mhm.
Anyone, most people who become realtors usually aren't good in school, right? That's kind of the traditional path, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
So, but it's very rare to have someone like really educated going to it. But because of that, we have that unfair advantage, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, right? You know that pharmacists are busy. You know that pharmacists are thinking about student loans. You know that, oh, how can I even pay off the student? How can I buy a house, right?
Right.
But with pharmacists, because we have a high income W-2, eventually we get to the point where most pharmacists do own a house after you've been out of school for a while, right?
Mhm.
So it's a very natural progression. I call it the golden handcuffs of,
Yeah.
of the rat race, unfortunately, right? You have a student loan, you have a mortgage.
Yep.
But it was nice that you leaned into what your unfair advantage was, to find clients, right? And 8 to 20 or 8 to 15 is pretty decent. I mean, it's enough to at least supplement your other
Oh
part-time
yeah.
job, right? So like, even though it may not seem crazy, like you see people on podcasts like, oh, I do like 100 deals, 200 deals a year, but like for you, just one a month is probably good enough. And
Yeah.
it supplements what you need to do, and you just do referrals to other markets, and that's even more passive. You just say, hey, I'm connecting you with this other realtor, and if they close, great. If not, well, you didn't spend that much time, right? Like overall.
Yeah, and if I go back even a little further, even when I look at like the first 2 years, even first 3 years of real estate became the way to fund our real estate investing. So for the first 3 years, I kid you not, every single dollar I made in that went to this real estate investing fund. Right? It was like a bucket in our ally account that we were only going to spend to buy and fix up properties. And so we took that that money, and again, we didn't need it for our day-to-day living, but it was a great way to basically say, look, we know what the budget is, we know what our regular income is, we're going to use that for the day-to-day stuff, and then anything I can make, the more work I do on real estate, the more we can buy and we can acquire assets and do all the pieces that we want to do. And so it just, it, like you said, it kind of came to this bonus thing that we didn't need, but now that we used it that way, it's paying for itself in dividends.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because basically you were part-time and your wife was full-time at that time.
Well, early on, so early on, I was still full time.
Okay, so you're both.
But yeah, and then again, that once we now that we have these real estate investment properties, they've allowed us to basically step back and do that part
No,
time.
I love that because basically, you both worked full time and then you had this side hustle and this money was house money at this point, right? Like you didn't
Right.
need it for lifestyle. You could cover your life living expenses, your extras, your needs, whatever you wanted with your double incomes. And then
Mhm.
whatever you made from the realtor was just like your fourth savings account where this real estate going to fund itself,
Yep.
right? And then so that takes discipline because it's very easy to be like, yeah, I just sold my house. Let me buy a new car, or let's buy a bigger house, or let's go on this nice vacation to like Europe, right? It's very very easy. And pharmacists, unfortunately, we are a little bit fancy and bougier, at least in
Right.
California. But yeah, let's kind of dive into the real estate investing section. So you kind of
Sure.
gave a preview that you saved up money being a realtor and then you dived into real estate investing. So kind of share that timeline.
Yeah. So right as we started getting rid of my loan, so we tackled my student loan first, and as soon as that went away, we were ready to kind of dive in and start buying property. And so we know we wanted to start local. Again, with me being an agent here, again, part of that unfair advantage is that I can get the commission from my own sale. Like if I'm buying a property, I am the buyer and the agent. So we thought like, let's start local, then I can property manage, learn what that looks like. So we really wanted something local here in Cleveland as kind of our first step. So we targeted a couple of neighborhoods, found a single family home in a high rental neighborhood that we really liked. And my wife and I really sat down and figured out like, what are our rules for investing? And it wasn't the typical what you think of like, oh, I need a 12% return. I need blah, 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 cash on cash. No, it was like, okay, what are the houses that we're going to buy? How are we going to approach this? And so one of the rules, for example, was we would never buy a place that we wouldn't live in ourselves. Right. So we took this approach of like, we don't need this to be something that just builds money and builds wealth and so on. Like it should be a piece of the community. Like we should be buying properties that other people can't buy or that people can't live in today and fix them up so that someone can live in them. And again, we had a kind of a philosophical approach to it. So eventually found a property that met that criteria and had no idea if it was going to be a good deal or not. Like we thought we knew our numbers. And it turned out really nice. I mean, we bought it at a good time. It was again, late 2018. And again, great time to buy, and that property is still with us today. And so we started with single family homes. We've bought more than a handful at this point. We flipped a couple. We're in the process right now of selling a few off. We're looking to start diversifying into some multifamily assets. But again, we started that single family game and kind of used that philosophy we developed to find the right properties for us.
Wow. Yeah, I would like to deep dive into that first deal and just see what the
Sure.
initial numbers were. And then since you still own it today, like what's kind of the current value and the current rents.
Yeah, I can tell you all that. So, it was a single family home, 4 bedroom, 2 bath, about 1,800 square feet, and it was
Mhm.
pretty done. Like it didn't need a ton of work, but it had some bigger issues that I think were kind of scaring people off. So, like it was a boiler heat house.
Mhm.
It was built in like 1920, so it was nearly a century old. And so it had some cosmetic things that need to be changed, but for the most part, it had some good bones. So we paid 130 for it, 130,000, which again, like California prices, you're like, but this is Cleveland, Ohio. So we paid 130,000 for it. We put probably maybe 7 or 8 thousand into it. We actually negotiated a new boiler into the deal, so the seller paid
Oh,
for that.
yeah.
We put like 7 or 8 thousand into fixing up. And part of the reason it was so cheap to fix up is because I did a lot of the work myself. So
Mhm.
I was over there every weekend for the first couple of weeks, got it ready to rent, and then started renting it out. I think the first tenant we had paid maybe 1,700 a month or 1,800 a
Mhm.
month, which again, when you look at like simple, like 1% rule math, it
Yeah.
was doing pretty well. And yeah, we kept that for a couple of years. We refinanced it in like 2020 and got it down to like a crazy low rate, which has been great. And now it's sitting on a 30-year fixed rate, and we rent it out. I think it's up to maybe 2,300 a month or something like that. I mean, the rents have gone up
Wow.
considerably since then. So yeah, it's doing really, really well.
Wow. How much is it worth today, roughly?
It's probably worth like 225
So
today,
still,
give
so
or
still
take.
that one, so still that 1% rule that it maintained.
Yep, yeah, give or take.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So yeah, some key nuggets from that, which I loved was, like you said, as pharmacists, we're busy, right? And I started off
Mm,
in turnkey real estate as well because you want to simplify the process because
mm.
buying real estate the first time is already a new process. But if you overcomplicate it by like throwing, I need to renovate this heavily. I gotta go to a new market. I gotta find a new property manager. So you just kept it as simple as possible. It's
Mm.
local. You know the area.
Yep.
You can manage it, you can renovate it, and the only kink was okay. This is a boiler issue, but where most people would give up on that boiler, you're just like, you know what? I'm gonna negotiate into the deal and say, give me a new boiler, right? Like not many people would think that way, right?
Yeah.
It's how can I get this done and make this a win-win,
Right.
right? Like that boiler was probably scaring away people, and they knew that probably going into it. Then, but you gave a win-win situation where you solve this for me, and I'll take this property off your hands.
We
And
were able to pull,
yeah,
we were able to pay full asking basically to do that. So like, yeah, I think what for the seller at the time, their concern was like, we need to get enough money for this house. And it's okay, if you want full asking, like this is what we need. And they said, fine,
yeah.
done. So again, it took that risk off the table for us, that thing that we were worried about. And it made it, like you said, a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and like they're definitely a willing seller, right? Because
Hmm.
they're fixated on a price, and then you're just like, we'll give you your price, but this is our only concern, and you
Right.
basically made it a win-win. And like I said, at the time, it wasn't like a super home run deal. I mean, like on
Yep.
paper, it just looked like pretty. You paid market,
Yeah.
but like now fast forward it, yeah, like you lowered your interest rate, it's renting at 2,300, and it's probably cash flowing pretty nicely at this
Yeah, it
point.
is. It's great. It's a good house.
And then you basically built equity and you got your feet wet now. You have experience. You have some property management experience. You renovate it, which is better than me. I can't do that. Uh, but I guess from here, what did your next property kind of look like, and what type of time window?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that property was that obviously we bought it as a conventional loan, right? It was just a typical investment property loan, 25% down. And what I immediately realized as I threw, whatever that is, like 30, $40,000 out the window to this property was like, whoa, okay. If you want to do this fast, like you can't just saving another 40 grand, like takes a while, right?
Yeah,
Even with the extra income from real estate and such, like that was not something I could do every 3 or 6 months, right? It's just not going to happen. So we started thinking about, okay, if we want to continue doing this and we want to build up our portfolio a little bit quicker, what are some options? And so we wanted to look at the Burr method. And that was kind of our next approach. And we looked at doing the Burr method here in Cleveland and realized that, well, if we want to do it successfully, we're going to need a bunch of capital up front. And again, savings is going to be slow, and we want to keep moving. We want to do this not necessarily just to be fast, but we wanted the next property so we could keep learning more and more.
yeah.
So we ended up partnering up with a buddy of mine, a pharmacist friend of mine up in Michigan, and doing a property up there that we could burr. And the price points were half of that in Cleveland. And I know Cleveland's already a lower cost of living area or middle cost of living area. But we were buying in Michigan, it was even lower, which was great. So it allowed us to try the Burr method with a lot less capital. I think we needed like $50,000 total to get that first property next. And we were buying it in cash basically and then fixing it up. And so we were able to turn that over much more quickly. And buy a couple properties that way. I think we bought 3 within a year or two in Michigan that we could burr. So that was kind of the next phase for us.
Wow. Okay, so a lot of good nuggets there. So kind of the first one, I guess how did you and the partner handle the deal? Like, who's was responsible for what role?
Yeah, so it changed based on the property itself, but in general, one of us would find it. He was again local boots on the ground, so he was finding a lot of the deals, and then he had enough property there that he had a whole crew of guys that he used as a construction crew. So a lot of times, what we would do is I'd basically pay him a finder's fee for finding these good deals. I would basically purchase the property myself. I would pay him the finder's fee and like a consulting fee to help me run the rehab. His crew would run the rehab, make their profit on it. Didn't bother me at all. And then that would be it. So it was a nice way for him to basically find these extra deals that he couldn't have bought anyway because they're, just not enough capital for himself, and make a little bit off of his connections and his knowledge.
Yeah, so I love that. So basically, that was also your unfair advantage, right?
Right.
Like you've probably, you're not from Michigan, you didn't grow up there. And, I did the same thing in Oklahoma where like I just found my boots on the ground and leveraged their team, right?
Yeah.
So you found a guy who can find deals. He has contractors, which those are the two hardest things, to be honest, to find. The lender is the easiest one out of the three.
Oh, yeah.
Right. There's lenders anywhere and they're nationwide. But I love that you said, and every investor falls in this trap, right? Like you buy the first deal, you just wiped out your capital that you spent like a couple years to save up. And,
exactly.
I'm stuck in that hole right now, right? I'll be honest. I'm stuck in that hole right now. But basically what you're doing is, you're buying cash. So you use that $50,000, you buy it cash, you renovate it, hopefully the value goes up a little bit. You're able to rent it out, and then the bank will reassess it. And you do, 70% or 75 or 80% loan to value cash out refinance. Hopefully, you pull out your original $50,000. You might have a little bit extra. Then now you buy another property, you rent and repeat. So that's a great way to use that same $50,000 to continuously scale, because capital starts to become a constraint, right? Either you have to recycle your capital and leverage, or you have to start raising money or partner with people who do have the money. So I love that, once again, you're like, how can I do this without having to save for more capital? So that led you to go to like a cheaper market, which is, I did the same exact thing, right? Like, like to me, as I mentioned, like I was buying apartment complexes for $500,000. Right. It's just like, this is half the cost of a single family home in California. And it definitely blew my mind. So great. So I guess from these three in Michigan, I mean, buying three in 1 year is pretty fast. Like what happened after that in terms of real estate?
So those worked pretty well. And again, it was three in about a year and a half. So every 6 months or so we bought one. And then we ended up flipping one after we did that. And because when we got to the Burr part, the numbers didn't make sense to keep it. So we ended up selling one. And again, we weren't like aggressively trying to acquire this massive portfolio, right? Our goal is never to just be people owning 1,000 properties because that's the thing to do. Like we're just looking to use this to supplement our life, right? So that was big for us. So we got those three. We ended up buying a couple more here in Cleveland once we had that capital kind of turning over. And keep in mind too, like while we're doing these deals, right? And nearly all of them, mostly through sheer luck and the market appreciating, nearly all of these were perfect burrs. So we got really lucky. Again, the market helped us tremendously. Even the times where I made mistakes and we were way over budget on rehabs, the market basically floated us. So like we looked really smart, even though I wasn't, right? So the market helped us out a ton in that. And then so as we're doing this, like we're saving up money like we had been, and we're preserving the capital that we started with. So it just keeps kind of rolling and compounding on itself, which was great. So it allowed us to buy a couple more properties here in Cleveland. And the point at which it kind of stopped or really paused was as the rate started to increase. So we bought a property here in Cleveland that I really liked. It was another Burr. We're like, oh, this is going to be great. We bought it. We actually got under contract on Christmas Eve of 2021. And we're like, oh, this is gonna be great. Like, this is awesome. And refinance it in 6 months, right? And we did our math with the rates that they had been. We had no idea rates were going to be going up anytime soon in 2022. We got to the 4-month mark, and I was just finishing up rehab. We had a couple more things to do because it was winter, and I do a lot of the work myself on a lot of these properties. So it just takes me longer than the typical investor. And so anyway, so we get to the point of like, okay, we're 2 months away from rehabs, and we start seeing the rates start going up, and they just keep going up. And so we had sunk about $40,000 into the renovation on this. Got to the day where we could refinance and realized like we just can't. Like there's no reason to refinance this. We're going to burn all this cash flow in this deal. It's better just to preserve the cash flow on this property and leave the money sunk in there, leave the equity in the home. So we didn't refinance that, and that kind of paused everything and just it slowed it all down quite a bit for us. So that's when that was not the last property we bought, but that was really when it started to change from what we'd been doing before.
Yeah, the one thing I love that you mentioned was, with real estate, you can have a plan going in, but obviously with your exit strategy, whatever you had the exit plan coming in, it might change, and just be open to that, right? Because
Yeah.
you did, like you said, like in retrospect, you're a genius. You did a perfect burr, right? But then no one, like even myself included, like a bunch of my single family homes appreciated like crazy from 2017 all the way up to like 2022. And I did nothing, right? I wasn't anything special. I'm not a
Right.
genius. It was just the market doing
The
its thing,
market.
right?
Exactly.
And like you said, it covered up your mistakes where you went over budget, didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
The value just went up, you got your money back. But what was kind of cool too was you're just like, one deal we have to flip it because it just didn't make sense to keep it as a bird. Right.
Yep.
So you just have to be flexible with your exit strategy, because that was my kind of downfall a little bit. I was so fixated on buy and hold. Like I just want to own every single property for the rest of my life. But like that's idealistic. But once you kind of come in, you might hit a point where you're like, you know what, this actually does make sense to sell, and this is why we're selling it. Right. And then another kind of nugget that I love that you mentioned was, basically when you invest in real estate, you're not just chasing this number. And I think a lot of people fall in this trap. I'm guilty. I'll be honest. My number was 100, right? My number was 100, and which I almost hit. But I was just chasing this arbitrary number. But ultimately, real estate was just for lifestyle supplementation.
Right.
Because I want to do exactly what you're doing, where I just want to have the option to work part-time or not at all. Right. Or maybe me and my girlfriend, she just part-time each as well.
Yeah.
And then, you can own a decent portfolio and have enough wealth to know what to do with. So I love that you said that, like, you know what, I can take longer, whatever. It's a marathon for you. You can take 30, 40 years to get there. It's not like you're trying to buy 1,000 units in a year. Like most indicators are doing, right? So you can go at your own pace. And you just mentioned that you have to pause. That's okay too. I'm pausing right now too, because my interest rates are so high that, like, if your interest rate's at 7%, well, it's better to leave your money in the deal because you're locking in a 7% return on your money, which is great. No one can say no to that. So, like right now I'm pausing too, because like my interest rate's high, and but when interest rates drop, then we'll just pull our money and go buy some more. So I just love how like methodical and like systematic you are in terms of your approach. And I think that just might stem from the fact that you're a pharmacist, and I'm a pharmacist, so I understand exactly, what you're doing and how you're doing it. So let's kind of fast forward till today. So like, what does kind of your real estate portfolio look like today?
So to mention that all happened like early 2022, mid 2022, and that's right around the same time that I decided to switch to part-time. We looked at our numbers, we looked at everything we were kind of sitting on, and said, yeah, we can officially like make this switch to part-time. Again, I've got a fantastic boss at work that allowed me to actually do that. So now I'm down to 20 hours a week. My wife's at 32, which is kind of perfect for her. I get to put the kids on the bus every day, take them off the bus when they get home. Like it's the perfect setup. And so that has slowed down our investing a little bit, just because obviously there's less free cash to go around. And that's been okay. It's allowed us to focus on vacations and hanging out with the kiddos. So now we've got, again, a handful of single family homes. We've sold off a couple of those. We're actually repositioning right now, trying to free up some capital. We're working on what I think will be our next big deal. So as I mentioned early on, one of our big philosophies is like, can we take properties and make them better for a community? Can we do something that we see a need? Can we fill it, right? And so one of the things that we know is that there's a housing crisis going on right now. No places for people to live. Rents are crazy high. And so we're working on a deal right now in Texas where we're trying to take and buy a hotel that will actually convert into single family, basically low cost, affordable housing. And the goal is really to look at this from the perspective of how can you take a market where they need single family studio type apartments, but it's not $1,600 a month like it is in Houston or whatever, right? How can we take that and make that more affordable, but also keep it nice? And so that's the deal that we're working on right now. And again, we've sold off a couple of those single family homes to try to make that happen.
Yeah, so as you're kind of doing like a hotel to kind of apartment conversion where
Hmm.
it's like kind of like smaller studios, probably like 500 to 600 square feet.
Yeah, they're like 650 to
Um,
700. They're like old suites that basically we're turning into studio apartments.
yeah. So how'd you kind of come across this deal? Like to kind of
So
share that process.
yeah, this is all through partnership. So it's really just through partnership. We actually met somebody through the podcast that
Mhm.
this is kind of their bread and butter. And so we started working with him and started looking at properties together and realized like, yeah, we could do this. And again, for me, it's big as it fills a really important need. The money is good, but the deal itself and what it means for a community seems like it's a perfect fit. So we're trying to figure out if it's going to work. We're still a couple of months away from closing. So I don't want to get too far ahead of things, but the goal is to make it happen. And if it works well, then to repeat that process in other places.
Yeah, so what I love about this is it's just kind of like the monopoly philosophy, right? You got four greenhouses and you trade up to a hotel,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and that's what you're literally doing. And what's really nice about real estate is, like you said, you have the money that you put in the deal,
Mhm.
or you deferred them, but like now they went up in value, so you can sell them off. If you do a 1031 exchange, you can defer all that. But
Mhm.
if you do just take the hit, you pay the long-term capital gains tax. Now you have the money ready to trade up to a bigger deal. And that's just kind of the natural progression as you get more advanced, right? Just like
Mhm.
pharmacy school, like you're not
Yeah.
going to be doing fourth year work as a first year. It's way over your head. So it's always nice to start like in single family homes. It's the most understandable because everyone lives in a single family home or lived in a single family home at one point or the other, or been in one. And then
Mhm.
eventually you organically trade up to something that's, more economies of scale. It's more scalable. So that's why I do apartments myself right now, where it just doesn't make sense for me to buy single family homes when I can just get 30, 40 doors
Sure.
under one roof. And it's just easier in terms of bookkeeping, talk to one property manager instead of like multiple. So no, definitely love that progression and, um, transition over to multifamily. But I guess for me, my question would be like, at what point did you just realize that, you know what, we can both just go part-time?
Mm.
Like, at what point did that mindset shift? And I guess how did it first feel when you actually did it?
Oh, it was amazing. Oh my God. So I'll tell you the day that I went part-time was basically the beginning of May 2022. And the kids were getting out of daycare and I was like, okay, we're off today. And they're like, oh, why is school closed? No, we're just gonna hang out. What do you guys want to do? And like it was just so cool to be able to just take that day and own it and not have to worry about checking email and dealing with a meeting and just all the stuff that like makes work rewarding, but also makes work a absolute pain sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And you could just turn that off and just focus on your day and focus on what you wanted to do. And one of the big things for us when we have like kid days with the kids, I'm real big on um, productivity does not equal a successful day. You don't have to have a productive day to have a good day, in other words.
That's true.
So we can do nothing. Like we could, lay outside and build a fort and read books and like that's just as valuable as a day as if we get a ton of stuff done and finish all these errands and go to 10 different places. Like the productivity does not drive what success looks like. So, for me, it's just been the perfect fit. But how we got there, it really was just a conversation between my wife and I, just figuring
Mhm.
out what the budget looks like, what the spending looks like. Were there things that we are going to have to cut out? Were there things that we were going to have to change? And for us, a lot of it just became, okay, we have less money to throw at extra real estate now. That
Yeah.
money is going to go toward vacation and hanging out with the kids and paying for stuff. And it just those were kind of the conversations we had before that took place.
Yeah, why I wanted to deep dive into that was because
Sure.
it can be scary, right?
Yeah.
Like you're used to getting this paycheck every 2 weeks, and you know exactly what day, what time, how much it hits your bank account, right?
Yeah.
uh, like people get used to that, and it is hard to have to cut it in half. You talk to a lot of pharmacists, you tell them that, you're like, that's impossible,
Yeah.
right? Like, I can't just cut that out and
Right.
live. How would I live, right? So it's definitely scary. But for you, it was more of a relief. You're like, God, I don't have to think about work anymore. I can just wake up, at their leisure, not your leisure, at their leisure. But you can
Exactly.
choose how to do your day, right? And like you said, I love that you said that. I need to hear that for myself too, because I'm super productive and I feel like I always need to do things. But it's okay to have a day where you just do absolutely nothing, and that's a
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay to just go out there and, I live by the beach where I'm at, like just walk out, go walk along the beach and just not a single thing on your mind, and your mind's completely turned off. You're fully present. I mean, nothing can beat that. I always joke, people build up crazy hectic lives as entrepreneurs, and then they spend a bunch of money to simplify their life.
Yeah.
Right. That's the
Exactly.
crap that I was catching myself falling into. Right. You did real estate ultimately to build a lifestyle that you want. Right. So you were in scale mode, right?
Yeah.
For a couple years. And then, but once you hit, hey, you know what? We had discussion. We're at a good place. Let's just stop buying more real estate, step back from our jobs. And now you're at the stabilization / enjoyment phase.
Yep.
And there might be a point where maybe you want to go back to the scale. Right. So that's what I think it was hard for me to realize too, because like I'm at the season now where I scaled, obviously, but now I'm trying to stabilize. But it's hard for me because I'm so used to just being like go, 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 go constantly, right? Something always a fire to put out. So I'm like trying to learn how to like relax again. And I'm like journaling about it too. So I love that. Basically you're able to go part-time, you and your wife. And how many years did it take?
Yeah. So, it is obviously, it took several years of working and to get the loans paid down, get the assets acquired, kind of get ourselves set up for success. And then when we got close, when we were, 3 to 6 months away, where we felt like we could do it. I remember it was so again, May of 22 is when we did it. But Thanksgiving of 21, I remember kind of sitting and talking about it, and like that, for whatever reason, that we just had like a good conversation about it then, and said, okay, well, if we think we can do this, let's try living on just one salary for 3 months and putting the other money into like a fund, right? And we're going to call that the summer fund. And if we need to pull from something, because we know there's going to be bumps, right? It's not going to be perfect. And so if we need to pull from something during that first summer of like, we're figuring this out, we'll pull from the summer fund. And so we did that. I think we ended up socking like 20 grand into this like savings account that was just like, we'll never feel bad taking money out of this account if it's paying for stuff as we learn how to be part-timers. And that's what we did. And it worked great. We ended up spending like almost all of that in like a year because it was just, the bumps were there, but it helped us stabilize without fear and without guilt, because I think the risk more so was doing that and then adding stress, right? I don't want to take a step back and then add money stress where I used to have work stress. That doesn't make any sense. So that simple little fund allowed us to really de-stress, because we set it up with the idea that this will never be a guilty draw. It will never be a problem when money comes out of this.
Wow, that was actually good to hear. Because like I always kind of had that fear myself. If I were to step away, it's just like, I'll tell you the truth. Like financial stress is worse than work stress.
Right.
It's the worst form of stress, and I've been through it. In the process of selling my mobile home park, I'm like, geez, this makes my job seem like a cakewalk. Right. Just 8 hours a day of this stuff versus financial stress is 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
Right. And it never shuts off. So I really like how you just said, you know what, hey, we're 3 months out. Let's do a soft go live. We're just going to try to lower our lifestyle a little bit, live off one income, but also sock this 20,000. But what I love that you said is, we're not beating ourselves up if we're dipping into this. This is kind of like the stupid tax is what I call it. There's things that there's things you just don't know, because this is the first time you're going part-time, and it's not like you can ask any pharmacist, hey, what'd you do when you went part-time? Most of them are like, hey, screw you. Like, I wish I could be in your position. Right. So you're not the most relatable person, but I love how you did a soft go live. You had this reserve that was like guilt-free, like, hey, we're going to mess up. There's things that we didn't anticipate, right? That's going to happen. And if I draw from it, oh, well. But kind of something as a backup too, like as pharmacists, we just can pick up more shifts. Worst case, if it fails, right? And maybe instead of 20 hours, you're doing like 30 hours. But even then, you're 25% at least retired from your job. So it's fine to go in a stepwise fashion, and that's kind of the piece that I really wanted to hit on there. So I guess my next question would be, so you kind of been doing this for about 1.5 years now. Have you kind of made any pivots or changes, since?
Yeah. Not entirely. I think the biggest change has been, now that the kids are full time in school, it's freed up certain hours that I didn't have before. So like when I first went live with it, we had kids in and out of daycare, and my oldest was just about to start kindergarten that fall. So it's kind of a weird transition time. We were still like the schedules kept flip flopping for like a whole year. Now I feel like we've really stabilized. The kids are in school 5 days a week. They both go to school full time. They're on the bus at 7:30 and they're off at 2:45. And so like every day we get kind of like 7-ish hours, whatever that looks like, right? Whether I'm working my regular job, whether I'm working in real estate. My wife and I have recently started taking Thursdays off together. So we do day
Mhm.
dates like every Thursday, which has been awesome and super fun. Like today is Thursday. We went golfing.
Yeah.
And like, it's just great. Like, and again, it's no guilt because we both got the kids on the bus. We went golfing, had a really nice lunch together, came home, got the kids off the bus together. And the kids loved it. Like we played with them as soon as they got home. So I feel like our schedule is really stabilized, and it's allowed me to kind of do a bit more work than I was doing before, because I can add in more real estate stuff that I wasn't able to when I was watching the kids more. So that's been kind of nice, and I think that will continue for a while, and then again summer it'll kind of reset. But for now it's nice and stable.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you shared that because, like when the kids are younger, like once in elementary
Mhm.
school, it's on a nice schedule, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
right? So now you have this freed up time that you didn't have before, and you can do your other, business ventures or just have time off with your wife, which is,
yep.
very rare, I imagine, with with like two kids. So
Exactly.
it's definitely nice, but like had you been both working full time, like you wouldn't have time for that, right?
Right.
It's hard. It's hard enough as is, between working full time, taking care of these kids. So I really like how, real estate basically gave you a lifestyle, and it just seemed like you did it like honestly in about less than 10 years. I
Yeah, it
mean,
took about 10 years.
in
Yep.
10 years. So in 10 years, you paid off a decent amount of student loans, you scaled a real estate portfolio, and you're both able to go part-time. I mean, if you tell anyone that 10 years ago when we graduated, you'd be like, you're crazy.
Right. Yeah,
So,
you're spot
and
on.
then what I love about your story is like it's nothing like any pharmacist can do what you just did. Like, to be
100%.
honest, it's nothing like out of the ordinary. It required some discipline, but like that's why I really love your story. It's not like intimidating. Like you didn't come from a bunch of money. You didn't come from a huge background in real estate, right? You're just a drug dealer that came out with a bunch of debt, and you're working at W-2. So
Yeah.
no, definitely inspirational, story. And like I said, life goes in seasons, right? Like now you're at a season where maybe you can do a little bit more, business stuff, and then, it just changes and rotates, and you just need to pivot um, as you go along. So I guess kind of my final question I like to end on is, I guess, what was kind of one key trait that you thought you had that led to your success?
Ooh. I think the big thing for us is intentionality. We again, it's really a family thing, but like we approach everything we do with intentionality, right? We don't make decisions without a goal and an intention behind it. You only get so much time, you only get so much money, you only get so many resources you get to allocate to the things you have in your life. Do that with a purpose, right? It doesn't always have to be a productive purpose, like I mentioned earlier, but do that with a purpose, right? So we're big on that. I think that's really helped us because when we sit back, and again, my wife and I spend a lot of time talking about goals and objectives and priorities, and the intentions behind those priorities. It allows us to make the moves that we want to make in ways that we find advantageous, right? And it sets us up the way that we want to be set up. And so that I think has been the biggest thing for us is that once we really got intentional with our life, because I'll tell you, right, if we go back to the beginning of this interview,
Yeah.
we graduated from pharmacy school and had no idea what we were doing. I didn't know how to pay back my debts. I didn't know what they should look like. The last thing I was intentional. I was just following the next thing I was supposed
Yeah.
to do. And that was when I was probably the most stressful, right? And now that we were intentional, it provides so much clarity and makes us so much more available. And it's been the biggest changer for us.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. As I was taking notes, I wrote the word intentional like down multiple times. So I had a feeling it was going to be that. And that's the sense that I got. Because like you said, you basically were very intentional how you did things. Like we intentionally saved money to invest in real estate. We intentionally did this step to get to this next step, which leads to this step, right? And then people just see you today with a bunch of real estate and you're, part-time, but they don't see all those little intentional steps that you took in the year past. And there's a lot of people that they just do their whole life without ever questioning or without being intentional.
Yeah.
But the moment you start having an intention, and then recalibrating yourself with that intention, because I'm guilty. I lost track of my intention as I was going down my conquest to 100 units.
Easy to do.
It's very easy to do, but as long as you can recalibrate yourself consistently and then work towards that goal, you see what you did, right?
Yeah.
You basically get financial freedom, and half of that 9 years, you probably weren't very intentional, right? So like, half the time, that's like an F, right? 50% of the time, I was not intentional. That's technically an F, right?
Right.
In terms of schools and grades, but despite that, you still hit a goal. So no, I just really wanted to reiterate that, like, the moment you start becoming intentional, the moment you like create a plan and goals and be very realistic and pragmatic about it, and it's not going to be easy, that's when you start to become proactive and take control of your life, right? And a lot of what you said is like the traits of a pharmacist, right? We're very systems oriented, very realistic, little steps at a time, very conservative. So no, really inspired by your story.
Thanks.
I'm sure the audience will get a lot of inspiration as well. And I guess, how can people get a hold of you, Nate?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Nate Hedrick on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, realestaterph.com, or you can check out our podcast. It's the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. We run the real estate investing show on that. So bunch of ways to get a hold of me. Happy to chat. If you guys want to reach out, you can again, probably LinkedIn is probably the fastest way to check me out, but lots of different options.
All right, and I'll make sure to put all those links in the description down below. Great. But thank you so much, Nate, for hopping on today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.